Hello, friends. Before we embark on this incredible and dangerous journey into the very heart of America's history, I want to ask you for one thing. Subscribe to this channel right now, because today will be not just a story, but a true immersion into an era where the question of life or death was decided daily, with millions of dollars and human lives on the line. Together, we will take apart how a simple tool, a weapon, became the main dictator of the rules for an entire country for a whole decade. And comment immediately as soon as thoughts or questions arise. This is a history that concerns everyone who has ever wondered where the law ends and chaos begins. Let's go. When I start thinking about America in the 1920s, what comes to mind isn't the image of jazz, not the glamorous dresses of the roaring 20s, and not the first skyscrapers. No, the first thing I see is the muzzle flash in a dark Chicago alley, the screech of Cadillac tires, and that distinctive, forever memorable chatter of the Chicago typewriter. This was a different America, shadowy, brutal, yet incredibly vivid. And the center of this universe undoubtedly was him, Alfonso Gabriel Capone, or simply Al Capone. But today, we will talk not so much about him, but about his loyal soldiers, his iron and brass comrades in arms that elevated him to the throne and ultimately became the symbol of an entire era. Al Capone's weapons. These are not just museum pieces. These are the keys to an empire. To understand why everything exploded, we need to rewind a bit. The 18th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, Prohibition. January 1920. Officially, a noble intention to strengthen the nation's moral fabric. In reality, the greatest gift the federal government could ever give to organized crime. Imagine for a second, a country with a multi-million population, established habits, where having a beer after work is part of the culture. And then, bam, all of it is outlawed. A colossal black market emerges. And where there is huge money, there is a ruthless fight for it. This is a basic law of economics. Demand creates supply. And if that supply is declared illegal, it is immediately monopolized by those who fear no law. But the matter wasn't limited to just smuggling whiskey and secret breweries. Prohibition became the detonator for an entire chain of explosions. It gave rise to bootlegging, large-scale alcohol smuggling. Bootleggers became the first rock stars of the criminal world. They had the fastest cars, the most modern radio transmitters for communication, and, of course, the most lethal weapons to protect their shipments from competitors and revenue agents in the form of corrupt, and sometimes honest, policemen. Money flowed like a river, and where rivers of money flow, entire empires immediately spring up. Mafia families, which previously controlled petty rackets and gambling in their ethnic neighborhoods, suddenly saw before them a bottomless ocean of opportunity. Italian, Irish, Jewish gangs, Chicago, New York, Philadelphia, Detroit, these cities turned into battlefields. And these were not fistfights. This was a real new type of war, urban, hybrid, where the suits of gangsters and the coats of policemen were sometimes tailored in the same shop. And against this backdrop, at the end of the 1920s, another blow strikes, this time economic, the Great Depression. The stock market crashed, banks closed, millions lost their jobs, hope, and faith in the American dream. And the criminal syndicates? Oh, they thrived. They had money, power, the ability to provide jobs and protection. For many desperate young men from the outskirts, the path into a gang became the only social elevator. And that elevator led straight to the hell of shootouts. The mob's power became so total that it began to penetrate labor unions, city halls, and courts. Al Capone, by some estimates, was earning up to $100 million a year in the late 1920s. In today's money, that's billions. He could afford everything. And first and foremost, the best weapons money could buy. And here we come to the most interesting part. The U.S. Army, having sat in the trenches of World War I, came away with a clear understanding. The future belongs to automatic weapons, to firepower density. Designers like the legendary John Browning and Colonel John Taliaferro Thompson worked on systems meant to give an infantryman the firepower of a machine gun in a compact package. But the Army is a conservative institution. The generals looked at these novelties with skepticism, conducting endless tests and delaying purchases. And so, this weapon, created for the battlefields of Europe, found another, much more appreciative application on the streets of American cities. The king of this criminal arsenal, its absolute symbol, is, of course, the Tommy gun, the Thompson submachine gun. Its creator, Colonel Thompson, dreamed of a trench broom that would clear enemy trenches. The irony of fate. His dream came true, but the trenches turned out to be urban slums, and the enemies, rival gangsters. Why did the Thompson become so beloved by bandits? Its simple effectiveness and psychological impact. Let's imagine a typical shootout of those years. Revolvers, pistols, single shots, slow reloading. Now imagine that from a passing car. A barrel with a round drum magazine sticks out and spews an entire magazine of 50 or even 100.45 ACP rounds in a couple of seconds. This is not a round for target shooting. This is a round for stopping. A hit from such heavy bullets was devastating. The wooden siding of shops, brick walls, thin metal partitions of cars. None of this was a serious obstacle. And that distinctive rolling chatter, for which the Tommy gun was nicknamed the Chicago typewriter, inspired terror. It was the sound of absolute power and ruthlessness. The early models were expensive, around $200, when a good car cost about $600. But for Capone, this was pocket change. He bought them in batches. And the culmination, the black mark in history, was one event. February 14, 1929. A garage on North Clark Street in Chicago. The St. Valentine's Day Massacre. Capone's men, disguised as policemen, lined up 7 men from George Bugs, Moran's gang against a wall, and coldly executed them with 2 Thompsons and 2 shotguns. This act of terror was unparalleled in its audacity and cynicism. It showed everyone the rules no longer apply. And the main argument that day was precisely the Tommy gun. After that, it forever became not just a weapon, but a media symbol, an icon of the lawless era. But the Thompson was not alone. If the Chicago typewriter ruled at short distances, for more surgical and daring tasks, gangsters and, interestingly, their hunters from the FBI came to love another creation of genius, the Browning automatic rifle, or simply bar. It was created by the very same John Moses Browning, whose pistols are still carried by police and military worldwide. The bar, this is no longer a submachine gun. This is a full-fledged automatic rifle firing the powerful .30-06 Springfield cartridge, the very same one used by American infantry in 2 world wars. Imagine the force of a shot capable of piercing straight through a car engine or a brick wall. Now imagine this weapon, designed for infantry squad support, in the hands of a bank robber. The main devotee of the bar in the criminal world was not Capone himself, but a figure from another, no less vivid opera, Homer Van Meter, the right-hand man of the legendary John Dillinger. Dillinger, Bonnie and Clyde, Babyface Nelson. These were free shooters, romanticized by the press, lone wolf bandits who challenged the system. And they understood the value of firepower perfectly well. The episode that forever inscribed the bar into the textbooks of crime fighting happened in the spring of '34. The Little Bohemia Lodge in Wisconsin. FBI agents, led by the young and ambitious John Edgar Hoover, surround the hideout where Dillinger's gang is hiding. They are confident of success. But they didn't account for the fact that the bandits inside had not only Tommies, but also a bar. What happened next? It wasn't a shootout. It was a real battle. Van Meter and Babyface Nelson, from second-floor windows, laid down a devastating automatic fire, pinning down experienced federal agents. They killed 1 agent, severely wounded several others. And, what was most humiliating for the FBI, the entire gang escaped, breaking through the cordon. This failure became a personal insult for Hoover and forced him to extract even more authority and money from Congress for his bureau. So, ironically, the criminal's weapon directly contributed to the creation of the powerful federal law enforcement machine we know today. Of course, there were other workhorses in the arsenal. For example, the famous sawed-offs, shortened double-barreled shotguns, or lupera. This was a close-quarters weapon, ideal for forceful takeovers, for kicking in doors of underground gambling dens, or for a heart-to-heart talk in a cramped office. 2 guaranteed shots of buckshot at a distance of a few meters left no chance. Simple, reliable, deadly. They were often carried under long coats, adding that sinister charm to the gangster's image. And what about the police? For a long time, they were hopelessly behind in this arms race. While the bandits sprayed bursts from automatics, policemen drew their heavy .38 caliber revolvers. It was like going to a duel with a knife against a machine gun. Only by the early 1930s, after the shock of the St. Valentine's Day massacre and Dillinger's brazen robberies, did the Chicago police and FBI agents begin to mass purchase the same Thompsons and rising submachine guns. A race began where each side tried to outdo the other in lethality. And here's what's astonishing. This entire criminal carnival, lasting a decade and a half, had a colossal impact on the entire culture of gun ownership in America. It mythologized the image of the automatic as a symbol of strength and rebellion. It forced legislators, for the first time at the federal level, to think about gun control. In 1934, the National Firearms Act, NFA, was passed, which for the first time introduced serious restrictions and taxes on the sale of automatic weapons, silencers, and sawed-off shotguns. It was precisely thanks to Capone's, Thompson's, and Dillinger's bar that America got its first federal gun laws. Another historical irony. But the most important legacy is the image. The black three-piece suit, the soft fedora hat, the Cadillac, and the gleaming Tommy gun with a drum magazine. This image was reproduced in thousands of newspaper articles, dozens of Hollywood films. Al Capone, without even intending to, became the first mass media superstar, and his weapon, its main attribute. This was no longer just crime reporting. This was theater, an epic spectacle about power, money, and violence, unfolding before the eyes of an entire nation. Today, original Thompsons and bars from the Prohibition era are collector's items worth tens of thousands of dollars. They lie in museums and private collections, as silent witnesses to a crazy era. But one only has to look closely at their polished wood and cold-blued steel, and it seems you can still hear that very chatter and the hum of engines on the dark streets of Chicago. An era when a weapon not only served as a tool for crime but became a true architect of power, dictating new rules of the game for everyone. For bandits, for police, for politicians, and for ordinary citizens. Friends, this history is not just an excursion into the past. It is a reminder of how thin the line is between order and chaos, and how quickly technologies created for one purpose can be turned to another terrifying side. The era of Al Capone ended, but its lessons, cast in steel and brass, are still relevant today. If this story made you think, if you felt the atmosphere of that time, like this video, write in the comments which weapon, in your opinion, most defines that era. The Tommy gun or something else? And, of course, subscribe to the channel, because we've only just begun to uncover the darkest and most captivating secrets of history. Ahead are many more stories where weapons, money, and power intertwine into one tight knot. Stay tuned.